Hello, fellow AI art enthusiasts. My name is Thane, and for this video, I thought that I would go over some similar looking styles in depth. I got a request to make a video about monochromatic styles, so I went ahead and selected some of those styles out of the SREF codes. One of the biggest discoveries I made while going over these styles was the fact that even though they looked very similar when I took a quick look at them, but going in depth with them with some actual prompts proved that they look very different from each other. So let's look at 50 monochrome style codes more closely. For the landscape image I have again selected to prompt the name I have given the style. And for the comparison images, I chose 4 words, or word combinations, that would represent a variety of different looking things. Let's go over them now. The first word I chose was Victorian. This was a combination of a time period and a certain type of aesthetic. The second word I chose was park. I wanted to include something nature-related, and I don't remember using this one in particular before. The third is a word combination. Photo of a fashion model. As usual, I wanted to expand the medium to see how the style code behaves when it is pushed towards photographic style. And the fourth word is factory. Again, an environment, but artificial. Hopefully with some architectural elements as well. Before we dive into the styles themselves, I do want to take a quick opportunity to thank my patrons for their support, and if anyone wants to come and join, you can find the link to my Patreon in the description of this video, or on my channel page. As a perk to my paid member, I continue to release PDF files with all of the prompts from this video along with some extras that didn't make it to the video. But now, let's get started. 411. Grayscale Industrial Dystopian. A very cinematic looking style, with some sci-fi elements. The style looks already photographic, adding the phrase, "photo of just makes the images kind of cleaner." 424. Monochrome Dramatic Atmospheric. Similar style across the board, photo doesn't really change the results. Seems to generate planets and some white stuff floating around everywhere. 433. Monochrome Graphic Detailed. Ornate and chaotic, mostly graphic. Photography retains some of the look and is indeed different. 441. White Sketchy. Indeed a sketchy and chaotic style. Seems to add some color splashes in some of the images. Photo style contains partly the sketchy lines as well. 466. Monochrome Detailed Graphic. Kind of a vintage graphic look. Photo style has some additional color to it, otherwise, again lots of tiny details and chaotic look. 490. Monochrome Detailed Sketchy. A more refined sketchy look that is almost photorealistic. Adding the word photo emphasizes that even more, but retains some of the sketch aspects. 496. Monochrome Textured Realistic. Feels like black and white anime to me. Quite photorealistic, adding photo emphasizes that even more. Environments seem to have a foggy look. 518. Ethereal Ink Vortex. Ink is a spot-on description, but I would add in watercolor. Also, I feel this brings in a lot of Japanese thematic, and adds some very faint color. 553. Monochrome Futuristic Journey. Very retro look. Not entirely monochrome, there are some hints of color in a few of the images. Style seems to really depend on the prompt, it varies from illustration to photography. 598. Monochrome Surreal Montage. An op-art reminiscent style, mixed in with photography. Again some color here and there, And so many different patterns. 599. Vintage Ethereal Dreamscape. Similar style across all prompts. Specifying photo does not alter the look at all. Very surreal, there is a sepia undertone to the color scheme. 611. Monochrome Silhouette Elegance. Indeed, there are many silhouettes present here. Faint colors, mostly pastel light pink and green tones. Photo does add some photorealism in. Artsy compositions. 643. Monochrome Expressionist Drama. Grungy and messy style reminiscent of photography. Specifying the word photo does clean up some messiness. Faint hints of color in some images. 653. Monochrome Manga Sketch. Spot on description, we have sketches and manga combined here in a monochromatic style. Some images again have some added color. Adding the word photo loses the sketch style though. 673. Monochrome Industrial Dystopia. Very dark and underexposed. Kind of photographic. Lots of playing with the lighting and contrast. Faint hints of green and red in some images. 682. Sepia Gothic Wilderness. Not that gothic or wild. Illustrative style with actually more Victorian or industrial era look. Photo lessens the illustrative style somewhat. Color scheme is black and sepia. 704. Monochrome Gritty Animation. Adding in prompts loses the animation style in most grids. Kind of retro. Red is emphasized whenever there is something that could be bright red in the image. 709. Monochrome Sketchy Illustration. Really sketchy indeed. Photo attempts to bring in some photorealism, but results in somewhat of a collage or a sketch overlay. 728. Monochrome Dark Illustration. Very illustrative, slightly sensual when women are depicted. Photo kind of normalizes and goes to full photorealism. Some color in environment images. 744. Monochrome Gothic Mysterious. Not exactly gothic, but maybe occult. Lots of ornate patterns that are kind of unusual. Photo does really photorealistic things. Otherwise, I get a video graphics feel mixed in with some oddities. 750. Black and White Ornate Photography. Very fashionable. I feel like there is fashion models in all the grids. Some patterns on the dresses there. Kind of a collage between photorealism and illustration. 770. Monochrome Linear Sketch. Indeed very linear, almost grid-like patterns that are somewhat reminiscent of cloth. In other parts kind of glitchy in environment images. 775. Monochrome Eerie Ghostly. Very vintage look. Like stills from very old movies. Yet there is a ghostly and misty illustrative feel as well. 795. Monochrome Robotic Surrealist. More of a retro-futurism sci-fi look that happens to be in the style of black and white photography and a slight hint of sepia tones. 828. Noir Fantasy Wilderness. Slightly retro photography or illustration look. Very strong contrast. Some color here and there. 842. Surreal Dystopian Dreamscapes. Indeed, a surreal collage or mosaic photo look. Again some faint colors in some of the images. 864. Monochrome Futuristic Minimalism. Looks like minimalistic surreal photography to me. Very strange looking and a strange prevalence of daisies. 874. Monochrome Night Illustration. There does seem to be some night imagery here in a few of the images. Strong sharp lines with contrast and a play with lighting. 880. Monochrome Dynamic Anime. Indeed, monochromatic anime look. Photo adds in some photorealism too. Follows the prompt somewhat, but it's hard to tell what is in some of these images. 882. Monochrome Abstract Geometry. Geometrical, mosaic, or collage indeed. Photo adds, in some color and photorealism. 900. Monochrome line art. Some of these images feel like they have been drawn with a single continuous line. Photo gets an overlay of lines. 918. Whimsical, neoclassical fantasy. An old illustration look. Extremely detailed, but at the same time very neat. Photo struggles, but does bring in photorealism to some images. 930. Monochrome misty photorealism. Splashes of red. Misty and ethereal, with obscured faces. Very eerie and scratched. 948. Monochrome vintage sketch. Indeed quite vintage looking. Very sensual as well. Very oriented to a male gaze, I would presume. 958. Minimalist monochrome Japanese ink. Not sure if ink, but indeed very minimalist. Not very monochrome though, there is so much color in these images, but at the same time, lots of white. 961. Monochrome graphic novel. A retro or vintage look, reminds me of the 60s, indeed reminiscent of graphic novels. Also has some splashes of color in some images. 966. Ethereal sketch portraiture. Does want to bring in portraits no matter the prompt. Lovely mixture between sketch and photorealism, the faces look really impressive and pretty. Not entirely monochrome either, it has some bluish grey and beige tones. 968. Retro architectural minimalism. Retro yes, but not very minimalist. Quite photorealistic. Mostly surreal with some geometric mosaic theme. 972. Intricate monochrome sculpturalism. Kind of chaotic, but indeed reminiscent of some ornate relief surfaces. There's kind of an underlying sci-fi theme going on in the environments. 982. Monochrome sketch scenery. Feels like charcoal sketches on brown tinted paper. Photo does add some photorealism and more color photography feel. 1001. Cyber Gothic Skeletonscape. A very strange one, lots of wires everywhere and kind of chaotic. Somewhat futuristic with some skeletons. 1070. Neon Noir Manga Romance. Yet another manga sketch style. It's different though than the previous one we saw. 1072. Ethereal Ink Elegance. A watercolor look with pastel colors, so not entirely monochrome. Looks like it's windy. 1073. Ethereal Mechanical Fantasia. Really nice drawing look with ornate lines. I love the effect of using fainter and softer colors for things in the distance. 1089. Post-apocalyptic forest noir. Very vintage look. Again underexposed and dark. Sometimes feels like a photo negative. 1094. Surreal Gothic Dystopia. Yet another dark style. Somewhat of a retro or vintage look. Indeed, Gothic and has some color or tint to it. 1120. Mythic Forest Enchantment. There isn't much of a forest remaining there when the prompt is changed. Also quite dark, kind of metallic with strong contrast. 1130. Vintage Sepia Whimsy. Looks like vintage style photography. At some parts it feels like someone has taken modern photographs in the style of old photography. A fascinating combination. 1154. Cyberpunk Desolation Noir. Very dark, kind of cinematic. Slightly sci-fi feel to some of the environments as well. 1199. Necrobiomechanical Fantasia. Very dark and metallic, really ornate as well. It's hard to tell what's in some of these images, follows the prompt occasionally. So there you go. 50 styles that on the surface look really similar, but when you take a more closer look with different prompts, the look varies a lot. I have to do this again with some other styles that look really similar to each other to see what happens and how different they actually are. Let me know if you found some styles that you really liked out of these. Also, if you have some cool combination styles, feel free to share with me and everyone else. I thank you so much for watching, and let's continue prompting.